Welcome to P English Literature, a YouTube channel that conveys Amazon, Goodreads, blog, and video book reviews coupled with interviews with authors. It's a perfect channel for book lovers, authors, and writers generally. P English Literature, the exact channel for you and me. Hi there, viewers. Today I'm joining a conversation with Cassibel, the author of Essays From Dysfunctional Families, Literary Betrayal. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Cassibel on the show. Hi there, Mr. Cassie.
Hi, how are you?
It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
You hired this book. How does Essays From Dysfunctional Families and Literary Betrayal come about?
So, I won't go into details. Prior to the pandemic, I was at a point in my life where I was exposed to many stories, people's life stories. And for me, I guess because I'm a writer, I don't consider family dysfunctional stories bad, or I don't condemn them. For me, it intrigues me, and immediately hearing a story, I can decide whether I can make a film from it, a play, a book, a poem, a song, an essay. I can immediately, sometimes I can write multiple things from one story. So I see story, and then I even have questions like, okay, what happened? Why did they do that? What caused them to do that? What happened to their childhood, someone else's childhood, to do that to someone else? And so I immediately go into the psychology of the story and the breakdown and the story, and can create anything from it. So there was one particular story I wanted to share. The only thing was, it wasn't my story to share. And I got conflicted in taking someone else's story and making it into a book without their permission. And so I made the decision not to write the book. The thing is, it was just an intriguing story I wanted to tell. And anyways, the thing was, even though the people who I was going to write about generally don't buy my books or read my books, I still had the mindset, what if they do read it and they realize it is about them? Will they be flattered? Will they be upset, angry? What will happen? And so from there, I got the idea to write a book about an author who did that. He wrote a book, and then his family and friends weren't happy with him. So originally the book was only supposed to be called Literary Betrayal. And I was only going to write a book about an author who, basically the backlash of him writing this bestseller. As I was writing it, I was kind of bored with it. And I asked myself, would the reader care about this story, being that they never got a chance to read the book? So that's when I decided to write the book that he wrote. And that's how Essays of Dysfunctional Families happened. And so when you get the book, the first book is a fictional book written by a fictional author. And then the second book, Literary Betrayal, is the backlash, or the story behind his family and friends' reaction to that book. And that's how the idea came about.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I think your response to this almost or stylishly answered my second question, because when I read through the book itself, I was a little bit confused while I was reading through it. I found the first part, like you said, because when I read through the first part of the book, that's Essays from Dysfunctional Families, it was written there that it's a fiction story, but to my own perception, I find it quite unbelievable to believe that this book is a fiction story, because I found that most of the stories in it are
I won't tell you which
raw.
ones. Some are completely fiction, and then some are loosely based on true events. So the ones that are loosely based on true events, I know for sure one of them, there is like a very small section of it that's true, and then the rest is completely false. And then some of the other ones are rearranged so that they're not true 100%. And so I won't say which ones, because as of now, in my mind, no one I wrote about will ever so one of them I know probably doesn't remember me because I just saw him recently in the store and he didn't recognize me. Um, and then,
Oh,
yeah, so, um, and then the rest, I don't know. The thing is, I just don't want to say too much because I don't want to be, people upset with. But like I said, the stories for me are, the thing for me is if we don't share our stories, we can't help people. And so for me, I find the stories intriguing because they can help someone. And so that's why I chose them, um, to help people. The thing is, we get, I guess, ashamed of our past or ashamed of the things we've done. So we hide it, we thinking that it's the best thing to do, when in fact, it doesn't really help us and it doesn't help other people. And so the stories, like I said, some are completely false. I was inspired maybe from a TV program, a film, or a book I've read. And I changed it enough so that it's a completely new story and it's fiction according to me. Now, if there's someone who's read it and said, this is my story, then that's pure coincidence. I didn't take anyone's story. But what the first thing I'll say is there really is no such thing as a functional family because every family has some level of dysfunction. And so um,
okay.
I would say disadvantages. Well, the only disadvantage of being born into a dysfunctional family is not dealing with it. If you don't, if you deal with it, there really is no disadvantage other than maybe you don't receive the knowledge or information you need. The thing is, you can, once you seek therapy and things of that nature, you can get what you didn't receive. Um, the only there really is no disadvantage. The disadvantage is when you pretend it you're okay, you pretend it didn't affect you, you pretend as if you're there's nothing wrong with you, you pretend as if whatever happened was okay and it's just the way it is and there's nothing you can do about it. That's when you get into disadvantage because the more you ignore it, um, the worse it gets. And so,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because we don't deal with it, families continue to be dysfunctional. Um,
Hmm.
once you just make up in your mind, and it's challenging because in most cases, not all, most of this dysfunction is in the family. So they tell you you're not supposed to talk about it, and people feel um, they feel like they're doing something bad by choosing to talk about it. They feel like they're shaming the family by choosing to talk about it. And so they don't talk about it. They don't deal with it. They just pretend it doesn't
Ignore it.
affect them. And that's something you have to, in your own, you have to decide what's more important to you, your health or satisfying a lie. Because at the end of the day, keeping it to yourself and to not shame the family, that's a lie. It really doesn't do anyone justice by keeping it to yourself. It doesn't do anyone to better by just keeping it quiet. And so you have to decide your mental health is more important than, and even your physical health, because sometimes people get into drug abuse or alcohol abuse because of what happened. And
Yeah.
so, it's best just to find a way to get help.
Oh, that's fascinating. I love your answer to that. And that wants to make me to ask another question because I discovered in your book that most of the element in the book, seek to try to communicate hope to those who are born into family that function in nation. There are actually a lot of people everywhere that find themselves in a dysfunctional family, either concerning their birth, concerning their father, their mother, etc. And I found that most of the concept of your book is trying to communicate hope to them so that they won't get discouraged and so that they can see themselves as a better person, ignoring whatsoever ugly circumstances that surrounded their bed, and moving on, not minding that it doesn't have any impact to make in their destiny. So I was going to ask you, how do you come about this idea in a way that you even make a story out of it?
Um, I mean, my first thing was, um, I know for me, when I've heard people's stories and they were, I guess you could say, worse than mine, it made me not feel so self-conscious of sharing my story with people. And so that's just life. If the Bible says, whatever you sow, that's what you shall reap. And so,
Yeah.
and when it comes to counseling, or when it comes to helping someone open up, the best thing you can do is tell about yourself. So many times when you meet someone, you start asking all the questions. The thing is, if you say my name is, they're going to automatically give you their name because you sowed that seed into them. They're going to do it back. So if you say this is where I work, they're going to assume you want to know. If you just start asking questions, sometimes people get, I don't want to answer those questions. If you give first, then they'll give back to you. And so the purpose of this was to give people dysfunctional stories to hopefully allow them to give theirs to some, whether to a therapist, or whether writing a memoir, or whether going on YouTube and making a YouTube video and sharing their story, or maybe finding a way to do like it motivational talk, or whatever the case may be. So my main focus was, if I made the stories so grotesque and so dysfunctional, worse and worse and worse, then people would be open to realize, okay, yes, my story is bad. The thing is, if they were able to share theirs, I need to find a way to share mine. And so that was the main idea of coming up with each story, making sure. And the main thing I did was, I don't know if you noticed, I purposely made sure they were each from a different town. And I purposely chose states I have no
Yeah.
clue about. And I purposely, when I chose the state, I went online and I typed in small towns in the state. And I chose a state I didn't know about. I did research on the state,
Yeah.
on the city. The cities are unknown, they're quiet, because most people think if you live in a small, quiet town, everything is perfect, nothing goes wrong. It's all of the big cities, New York City, Las Vegas, those are where all the bad things happen. At the end of the day, bad things happen everywhere. So I purposely chose towns no one heard of,
Everywhere.
no one knew about, they're small, because it happens everywhere, and it's not just in certain places. And when you see this happening to someone in a small town that's supposed to be quiet and perfect, hopefully it causes people to go, okay, maybe now it's now, not maybe, it is time for me to share my story. It's time for me to be open about what happened to me. And it's not, if you've noticed, I did my best
Yeah.
not to do a blame
Wow.
game
Thank
where they're blaming, they're just telling. And I don't want people to get to that, because when you blame, it doesn't solve the problem. So there's a difference between blaming and just telling
you.
what happened. And so that was my main purpose, was hopefully to get people to start telling their story. And like I said, the ideas came from either life stories I've heard, or just kind of, for instance, the one story about I believe it was a boy who his father would beat him for not doing dishes that were not actually in the sink. Um, so what I did was I created a story that everyone's had, children chores. Your parents say do your chores. If you don't do them, you get in trouble. Period. So I said, well, how do I make it worse than that?
Yeah.
And so that's when I said, how about someone getting in trouble for doing dishes that are not actually in the sink? So his father comes home and he sees dishes, but they're not actually in the sink. There literally are no dishes there. And yet he's getting in trouble, whipped, abused for not doing dishes that are not in the sink. And so I made sure each story was so over the top, because I think we only get comfortable when we see someone else's story that's worse than ours. And so that was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Wow. I love your response to that. That's very amazing. I truly love your response to that. Your answer to this would want me to make you to ask you another question. And this is not about Essays from Dysfunctional Families, but from one of your first books that I've read, which is Four Keys to Success. In Four Keys to Success, you wrote, you seem to express some sort of ill notion towards, college education. And I'm particularly interested in that point. You wrote about how college is unnecessary, and how what they would do mostly is to give you a piece of information and collect a huge amount of money from you. And these are the same sort of information that you can find for free on either YouTube or Google or other category. I was going to ask you, could you, and you also wrote that, college education is not necessary, or is not like a passport to a successful life. Could you please expand more on this subject?
Well, college itself is not an education. Most people call it an education because their parents told them it was. They never took the time to actually find out, is it an education? You got to
Wow.
ask yourself, what is an actual education? Um, if you ask someone, do you remember everything you learned in college? Everyone's going to say no. So then the question is, did you really get an education? Because if you don't remember it, is that an education? Because if receiving information, taking a test and not remembering it is considered education, then if you tell me your name and I forget, I can say I got an education, you know? And so um, education itself is not so much college. Education is using what you've learned for your or someone else's benefit. So if you teach me how to make a shirt and I don't remember how to make it, then I haven't been educated and I can't help myself because I can't make myself a shirt and I can't help anyone else because I cannot make them a shirt. If I actually remember what you taught me and I start making shirts, I now can benefit because now I can sell those shirts and then I can help someone else because they can now buy those shirts for their necessity. And so an education is not just sitting in class. An education is, in fact, the reason why school and college is not education is because it's not education until you start using it for someone's benefit. If you never use it for someone's benefit, it's not an education. The perfect example is when the pandemic happened, um, and schools shut down and parents had to teach their children and had to help them with their homeworks. They were complaining they didn't know how to help them. And so now the question is, well, you've learned it yourself. How can you not help them if you're educated? Because you're not educated. You were informed. The thing is, if you don't use information, your brain doesn't remember it. And at that point, it's not an education. And so school and college itself is not an education because the book says it either gives you false information. Um, Most of the information that's taught in the school system outside of reading, writing, and arithmetic is not true, especially history. And you don't know that until you read, which is another way you know school and college is not education because most people stop reading when they leave it. And reading is the first step to education. And the fact that most people stop reading is because they think they're done. They don't need any more information. They're good. They know everything they need to know. And that's not true. You need to read every day because there's no matter what information you receive from someone, there is a 50% chance they lie to you, either knowingly or unknowingly. And the only way to know that is you have to fact check. And school and college does not encourage fact checking. You cannot come into school or a college class with books to say, hey, this is what you said. I found out that that's not true. Can we have a discussion? You can't do that in school. They don't allow that. And that's what education is. It's a conversation. It's not a dictation. It's not me telling you something. It's us having a conversation. Because if you dictate something to me and it's wrong, that's not education. That's exception. And so it's very much
Yeah.
and then things like when you think if you ever research Thomas Edison, his mother took him out of the school system because she realized it wasn't working for him, and she taught him himself. Um, Most people believe he invented the light bulb, which he did not, which proves you're not getting an education because they weren't honest about the invention of the light bulb. The light bulb was invented in the late 1700s when Thomas Edison wasn't born yet. There were over 20 different inventors of the light bulb before Thomas Edison made his version. Prior to Thomas Edison, most light bulbs lasted less than an hour. So you basically had to change it a few times a day. His light bulb was the first light bulb to last 3 to 5 hours. So not only did he not invent the light bulb, we never used his light bulb because by the time we got in, you were born, there were already 10, 15 other inventors who invented a light bulb after Thomas Edison that lasted longer than 3 to 5 hours. And so it's when you research that and you look at there's over 40 different versions of the light bulb before we get to the light bulb we use today, they never taught that. So you didn't receive an education. Furthermore, Thomas Edison never went to college for light bulb building because it didn't exist. In fact, the education he needed to invent the light bulb, his version of the light bulb, he had to invent it because it didn't exist. And so school and college is not education. Education is information you use to benefit yourself. Sometimes you can get that information from college. Sometimes you have to be the one to invent it. And so, and that's what really makes people successful, is when you invent things that no one has seen, no one has heard, it doesn't exist. Um, you don't really get much success copying or following behind someone. The success comes from people. I mean, now I'm sure you heard of it's Elon Musk and Richard Branson and the the former CEO of Amazon all went to space. They, you know, they're doing something new where you can go into space for one day. Before it took, I don't know, months, years before you could get go and come back. They found a way to go in a day, and none of them have a college degree in going to space. They just had the money. And how did they get that money? By creating something that didn't exist. Richard Branson dropped out of high school and started a recording company. Mind you, he had no background in music whatsoever. And yet he decided that's what he wanted to do. The
Wow.
Amazon dude decided he wanted to start selling used books in his living room. And now that was the beginning of Amazon. He was literally selling used books, which I'm assuming he got from thrift stores, in his living room. Now look at Amazon. And then Elon Musk, Tesla. Again, no college from these guys because they were doing something that didn't exist. So they had to be the one to create the education. So now if someone wants to come behind and make another Amazon, the information is already out there. The thing is, someone had to start it. And so success really comes with you starting and creating education or an invention that doesn't exist. And you find it, it takes time. Obviously, there's no overnight success, doesn't exist. It takes time to
Wow.
figure that out. It's said that Thomas Edison, his version of the light bulb took him over 1,000 tries before he got it right. And so it's not an overnight thing. You just got to keep going till you figure it out. And so it's not that education is 100% needed to succeed. It's just that school and college is not education. They're sources of information. The thing is, if you don't fact check what you're being taught, you'll never know if you are actually being educated or deceived. And so,
Wow. I love your response to this question. I'm motivated. It's actually very strong and it's very, very strong. I find it very helpful. And I hope the viewers too would find it very helpful because I love the way you explain everything and you demystify all the mysteries attached to it. But I was gonna ask you, though I think this other question is a little bit very plain and obvious. How about professional courses? What would you like to say about that in terms of education?
well, education is very important. It's just finding out the best way to get it. Um, most people, I mean, for instance, in California, you do not need a degree to be a lawyer. You just have to pass the bar exam. And so now the question is, well, how do you get that information to pass the bar exam? You research, library. There are so many ways to get the information you need to pass the bar exam, and you can take it more than once until you pass it. If you have a passion for it, then it'll be easier for you to pass it than someone who has absolutely no passion to be a lawyer. Um, the thing is,
Wow.
we also, because we were taught about school and college, we want education to be easy. We just want to take a test, pass it, and get out. Education is not necessarily always easy. Sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes it takes longer to gain that education. Sometimes um, it's just challenging. Um, when you get to the point of, I want the most successful education, I mean, I want the education that's going to benefit me the most. And at the end of the day, college doesn't benefit us the most. Um, when you, all they do is teach you how to do the job. When you get to the job, you don't know what you're doing. Someone who's been there trains you. All that training time is education, whether it's teaching you how to answer the phones, whether it's teaching you how to turn on the computers and log in, whether it's teaching you how to talk to the customers, how to deal with the customers. One of the things college and school can never teach you is how to do your job, is because every customer is different. Some customers will come in and get what they want and leave. Others will scream and holler and yell. College doesn't teach you how to deal with those certain customers at the time. Um,
Yeah.
one of the things I would teach myself being in customer service was how to deal with the what ifs. And so if something new came about and the manager, said, we're doing this now, the first thing I would think about is all of the ones who are going to complain. What do I tell them? College can't teach you that. Um, the workplace basically is the best source of education, because that's where you make your mistakes. That's where you find out what you need to know. Most times you won't need to know what you need to know until that day and that opportunity and that situation pops up. Is boom, that's an educational moment of finding out, okay, we need to change our policies, we need to change the contract, we need to change this, we need to alter all of that is education. We keep forgetting education is not just school and college. Education is every day. When you trip and fall because your shoes are untied, now you're educated, keep your shoes tied. That's all education is just knowledge you need to benefit you. And so it's we've made education school and college, and that's it. And that's not education. All education is information you need that's going to benefit your life daily. Every time when you buy a car, if you've never bought a car, the first day you buy a car, you've been educated on how to do it. I'm sure, I don't know, in Nigeria, here in America, there's a negative vibe behind buying cars, because car salesmen sometimes like to cheat you out your money. They'll add more stuff to the contract that you don't actually need. And if you're not knowledgeable of that, you can end up paying more than you should have paid. Most people don't know that when they go buy their car for the first time, because school and college doesn't teach that. If you don't have a parent or someone telling you that before you go get a car, sometimes you might buy a car and you paid more than you really needed to pay. You'll sign a contract that's not really good because they don't teach how to read a contract. That's the one thing I don't understand in school and college, is they don't teach contract reading. And if you buy a car, if you get a home, apartment, or a house, even when you join social media, they say, click here if you agree to our terms. That's considered a contract. And most people don't read those policies and terms before they agree. Every time you sign up for anything online and you have to read, there's a contract, a policy that they ask you to read and then agree to it. And most people don't do that because most people are afraid to read it because they're afraid they're not going to understand it. And the question is, well, if you've been educated, why don't you understand how to read a contract? Because it's not being taught. And that's what education is, being taught what you need in life. And so, education is amazing if you know what it is. Most people don't know what education is because they haven't studied education. We were told you go to school and college to get an education and then you get a job. And we don't question because we were told, don't you question your elders. They know what they're doing. You just do it, everything they tell you to do. And we don't challenge. And at the end of the day, that's really a mindset of slavery, because slaves were not allowed to question their masters. And when you're in a relationship that's not slave and master, it really needs to be okay to question and challenge. But our mindset has been conditioned to be slaves no matter where you go. In the household, you can't question your parents. In church, you can't question the pastor. At school, you can't question the teachers. You can't question your police. Even if you know they're doing something wrong, you can't question. And we live in all over the world, really, we live in a slave world. You're taught, don't question. And at the end of the day, questioning is just as long as we're human and we cannot speak truth 24/7, questioning needs to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, that's very amazing. I so much enjoy and appreciate your answers to this question. They are very, helpful and informative. And I need to, give you some accolade for that. Thank you very much for an amazing answer.
Thank you.
And yeah, another question I'd like to ask you. When I read through your book, I see that in your book it's somewhat motivational in tone. While you wrote about 4 keys to success, you seek to help people on the way to success. You seek to, show people the way to success and show them the key to unlocking the doors of success. And while you wrote about Essays from Dysfunctional Families, literary betrayal, you also seek to give a kind of hope and encouragement to those people who find themselves in a dysfunctional family. And I was going to ask you, how do you come about writing all these things in a way that it helps humanity?
I believe we're all supposed to do that in some way, shape, or form. When we get the light bulb of, oh, I get it, we're supposed to find a way to help other people get it, and to encourage them to get it. We live in a society all over the world where, condemnation is what we do. We criticize, and you should be ashamed of yourself, and you're a pervert, and you're this and you're that. And that doesn't help anyone. That doesn't, I mean, when you think about every time people are criticize something, whether it's murder, whether it's rape, whatever it is, the question is, well, did that stop it altogether? Did people completely stop doing those things? No. So then why do we keep thinking that condemning people is how they're going to be helped? And so the best way to help people is when you get that aha moment in your own life, whether it's how to tie a shoe. Now help everybody else who's having trouble tying their shoes. Um, the thing for me is I got my aha moment in life in general is when I went, even though college is not an education and I don't necessarily agree with it, the one good thing that I got out of college was I started learning truth. And I realized most of what they teach in school is not true. And I learned that through college. And at first, I was angry at that because I thought to myself, well, if you go to college to become a teacher, that means some of the stuff you're teaching is a lie. And so my problem was, why aren't they doing more to make sure that doesn't happen? And so I realized that anything that hasn't changed within 10 years, chances are will never change, because just as long as people know they're doing wrong and they choose not to change, then that means they're okay with doing wrong. And you can argue, you can protest, you can do all those things. At the end of the day, if they're choosing not to change, they're just not going to change. So then what you can do is you change. You decide that I'll teach. I'll be the one to show people that you need to fact check. I didn't know anything about fact checking. I was not a reader originally. I didn't think reading was fun because everything I read in school was boring to me. So I just thought that meant reading was boring. And when I got to college and realized most of what I was taught was a lie, I began to read and I began to research and I began to fact check. And anything that was conflicting. So, in other words, if you told me if you plant an orange seed, you're going to get a peach tree, and once the tree comes up and there's no peach tree, it's an orange tree, that's conflicting information. That's not a time for me to go, oh, well, they have a degree, so it's okay. No, that's a time to really question that information because it's clearly wrong. And so that's what I do when I see conflicting. It's not that I'm blaming anyone or I'm condemning anyone or I'm tearing anyone down. It's just, if I've noticed you said something to me, if what I hear is not equal to what I see, then obviously something is wrong. And I need to either question what you said or question the thing. I need to go question. And in me doing that, I started researching more and more and more and more. And the more I've researched, the more information I received. And I realized the only reason why we don't know stuff is because we were told. You just believe what you're told. You don't question it. You don't challenge it. You don't fact check it. You just, if they told you it, it's true, believe it. And so my goal mostly in writing is to help people realize you need to fact check. You need to see things differently. You need to realize if you're told something and you just don't see the results of that, you need to check it out. You don't just need to let it go. You don't need to just keep believing in something you can clearly see it's not working. I mean, people are so hard on when you say college education. They get so angry when people talk against it. And it's like, no one's talking against college education. People are specifically saying that maybe it's just not working. Because if you get a college degree and you go to work and then you're on social media Monday through Friday complaining about your job and complaining that you got to go to work and complaining you can't wait till Saturday, did college work for you? Because if you went to college to complain about your job, you actually don't need college. You can go get a 9 to 5, work at a fast food chain and still hate your job. And so if going to college means you're going to have to hate your job, common sense is maybe something is wrong. Maybe that's just not it. And so you have to have the courage to question what you've been taught. If it's not what you believe it needs to be, you need to question it. And so my goal in writing, and even with essays, was that, again, we've been told you don't tell stuff, you keep it to yourself and everything will be okay. And I hate the saying, time heals all wounds, which is not true. So to give you an example of that, and that was basically why I wrote Essays from Dysfunctional Families, because people believe that if you just get over it, you'll be, time after some time you'll get over it. And so the best thing to show you is if you get stabbed and the knife is still there, it's not going to heal itself after some time. The first step is you got to go somewhere and you got to get the knife removed, and then they have to work on that wound, sew it up, whatever the case may be. Once they care for the wound completely, then time is going to heal the care of the wound. And even in that, they'll tell you what you can and cannot do, how you need to take care of it during the healing process, because you don't want to get it infected, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to our mental health, it's the same thing. If something bad happens to you mentally, time is not going to heal it. The first step is you need to go somewhere and you need to get that stuff out of you. And you won't be able to do, you won't be able to heal if all that stuff is still in you. And so in both books, the encouragement was to hopefully get people to think differently than what they've been taught. And to simply ask yourself, if everything you've been taught is correct, do you have evidence for it? Because we all know, karma. We know for every action, there's equal and opposite reaction. So if your life is 1000% perfect, then obviously everything you've been taught is true. If you can honestly say there are some things wrong in your life, then you need to find where you've gone wrong. What information did you receive that you received as truth that maybe it's just not true? And you can only know by the results. In other words, if you're doing something and you're not getting the results you want, you're doing something wrong. And you don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to feel ashamed. Just admit it. Okay, I'm doing something wrong. I need to figure out what I'm doing wrong and change it. You're not going to get in trouble for, I think we still have this mindset of, oh, I'm going to get a spanking. I'm going to go to the principal's office. I'm going to go to hell. And at the end of the day, when you're doing something wrong, the only bad that's going to happen to you is the consequences. Acknowledging it's wrong is not, nothing bad can happen to you from acknowledging it. We just got to get out of that mindset of you can't question. You have to question everything. The best thing I can do for you to help you understand the importance of questioning is to research beans. And you may say, what does that have to do with anything you're saying? We've been taught that beans are vegetables when in fact they're actually fruit. And so if you don't even know something as simple as a bean being a fruit, you got to ask yourself, what more don't you know? Whether that's mental health, physical health, educational health, financial, whatever the case may be, what more don't you know? And why are you afraid? Because even when you tell someone they're wrong, they won't research first. They'll just immediately, oh, da, 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 da. And it's like, why are you afraid to at least research before you respond to something? Because it doesn't hurt to research. Whether you're wrong or you're right, you'll either find out you're wrong or you're right. It's like not a big deal. You're not going to get hit by lightning. Like nothing bad's going to happen to you for researching. And so that's why I do what I do, to help people understand there's nothing wrong with being wrong. And there's nothing wrong with researching what you've been taught, because it's a generational thing. Our parents were taught what we were taught. So they don't know anything differently. Our grandparents were taught with it. They don't know anything differently. And we just go from generation to generation to generation, and no one's stopping and saying, is any of this correct?
Wow, thank you for that amazing answer to that. That's quite very intriguing. I love that. Okay, when I also read through your book, I discovered that it's co-authored. You spoke about the first part belonging to Dan K. Brent and the other part belonging to yourself. And I was going to ask you, how do you both come together to write this book? How do you come with the idea, and how close are you guys, when it comes to bringing this book together?
Well, he doesn't actually exist, which is funny you
Oh,
should say that. Yes. I wrote both books. Um, so Dean K. Brent is a fictional person. He doesn't actually exist.
wow.
Um, the like I said, the reason why I did that specifically is because I didn't want anyone thinking I was talking about me. Because if they thought I was talking about me, then they would think some of those stories was about them. Whoever knows me, oh, he took my story. And so that's why the book Literary Betrayal is about a fictional author who wrote a book. Um, and the funny thing about that is when I went to copyright the book, they took much longer than usual to get it back to me. So if I'm not, I emailed them and they told me to call them. So I called the copyright office and I said, this is Casey Bell, blah, blah, blah. I said, I just want to know, is everything okay? Because I haven't received back. And mind you, I had copywritten some works after that and got them back. And so I was like, is there anything wrong? And they said, well, we're finding conflict with your application because you're saying that Dean K. Britt wrote this book, yet you didn't add him to the application of the copyrights and he needs to get credit for this. And I said, oh, I said, I just assumed that they would read the book first before to make sure it wasn't plagiarized. And I assumed them reading the book, they would get the point that Dean K. Brent doesn't exist. And I had to explain to her, I said, no, I said, Dean K. Brent doesn't exist. I said, I wrote both books. I said, Dean K. Brent is a fictional author who wrote that book. I'm the one who actually wrote it. And in her response, I can tell she still didn't get it. I did get the copyrights, but I don't think she actually understood what I was saying. I didn't realize how confusing it would be. I just assumed once you read the second section, you realize that Dean K. Britt doesn't actually exist. Like I said, the reason why I did that is because I didn't think anyone would care about the author if they didn't wrote the book that they're angry about. And so that's why that book is there, so you can understand why they're angry with him.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's one of the misconception I had when I was reading the book, because I find it very difficult to understand. It's very confusing. And I think I mentioned, even in my review, I wrote Essays from Dysfunctional Family, Literary Betrayal by Cassie Bell and Dinky Brent. I don't know, Dinky Brent does not actually exist, but that's funny. That's actually fun, and I think it's a nice method.
Well,
Okay, Mr. Cassie.
I think it's confusing because if I'm not mistaken, it's the first time it's been done. No one's ever done that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
no
It
one,
is actually
yeah.
techniques. I mentioned it in my review that if you even wrote of a place whereby the book became a bestseller, and I was like, in the book became a bestseller. It's actually nice. It's a nice technique, and I love that. Okay, I was also going to ask you, and what sort of advice do you have for people who are, authentically, really born into family that dysfunctional nation? A lot of people might have the stigma together, carrying the notions wherever they are, evoking anger on whoever is at fault in their family. So I was going to ask you, what sort of advice do you have for people who are born or who find themselves in a family that is dysfunctional in nature?
Well, we all have been born in a dysfunctional family. Some we can say worse than others, especially if you were born into an occult or your parents weren't very, didn't do their job as parents. I could go into detail. I'm not going to do that. I mean, the
Yeah.
first step is acknowledgement. Just as long as you're too ashamed to admit it, you can never do it. Nothing can happen. And so the first step is acknowledgement. And again, not acknowledgement of blaming, because your parents can only give you what they have. If they weren't raised, in a certain kind of home, there's nothing more they can give you. It's like, for instance, if they were never taught to look both ways before crossing the street, they can't teach you that because no one gave them that information. And so you can't, yes, they could have done better, should have done better, maybe went to the library, picked up some books on parenting, so they could have done better. That's nice. At the end of the day, you can't change the past. So the first step is not blaming, is understanding they were just ignorant. They weren't raised correctly, so they couldn't give you what they didn't have. The second step is to acknowledge what went wrong. Because if you don't acknowledge what went wrong, when you have children, you're going to do the same exact thing with your children, if you choose to have children. Um, and deal with that. In other words, what went wrong and what is a better way of doing things. And I mean, I know we as humans are still not 1000% happy with therapy. It's a must, because you can't keep that stuff inside you. Life itself is a in and out. Everything is in and out. In order to get some plants, you got to put the seed inside and out they come. We breathe in, we breathe out. In order to procreate, it goes in and then it comes out. And so everything in life is an in and out. So anything that comes inside you, when you eat, at some point it comes out. When you drink, it comes out. When you blow your nose, things are coming out. And the only reason why you have to blow your nose is something came in and now your body is making it come out. When you cough up mucus, something went in, your body is making it come out. So everything in life is an in and out. And so when it comes to mental health, anything that goes inside you that's not supposed to, whether it's you witness a death, a murder, you are abused, abandoned, neglected, whatever it is, once that comes in you, it has to come out. And the only way it has to come out is you have to share it with someone. And obviously, the only reason why the best place to share it is with the therapists or counselors, because by law, well, I'm not sure in the rest of the world, in America, by law, they're not allowed to discuss that information. So they can't go around gossiping about you. You won't believe what so-and-so told me. They can't do that by law. They have to keep it to themselves. And so that's why that's the best place to begin. If you do believe, if whatever God you believe in, I personally believe you can speak to Holy Spirit. That can be the first step. And the second step is, if you can't afford therapy, there's group therapy. I know in America, there's a bunch of 1-800 numbers you can call that are free, that you can just talk to people. They have apps now that are less expensive than going to a psychologist. And so there are many ways to get it out, even if you have to make a video and put it on YouTube and talk about what you've been through. And I always say you don't need to necessarily say names and things of that nature, because it's not about condemning people in that beginning process. It's really about just getting it out. Like I said, if you're stabbed and the knife is there, the first step to healing is you got to get the knife out of it. You can't leave the knife there. You got to get it out. And so the first step is just to find a way to get it out of you, to talk about it, to discuss it. And the initial stage, you will be ashamed, because that's what we were taught to be. It takes time to get out of that, shameful stage. One of the best examples is, I don't know if you know Joyce Myers. She is an evangelist. She was molested by her father, and it's not every time she gets up and speaks. The thing is, anytime it's relevant, she talks about it, and you can tell she's not ashamed about it anymore. And she's forgiven her father. She doesn't have resentment anymore. You can tell. And so the thing is, it's 2021 now, so she can talk about it. That healing process started back, I believe, in the 70s or 80s. And so it takes time. The thing is, it has to, like I said, if you get stabbed, the healing is going to take time. The longer the knife stays in you, the longer the healing is going to take. So you really have to start the process as soon as possible. And you have to find the best process, because maybe a psychologist doesn't work for everyone. Sometimes group therapy works good for someone. Whatever the case may be, you have to start that process right away. And that's the only thing I can tell to help people who've been in dysfunctional families. The first step is, don't be afraid to acknowledge, yes, there were some things that were just not right. And then the second acknowledge thing is to find someone to talk to about it. And then make sure you are aware, because we don't understand, if you grew up in a home where, you put your left shoe on your right foot, by the time you realize that's wrong, it's going to take some time for you to get it right. The thing is, if you've never acknowledged that was wrong, you'll keep doing it. And so the first step is to acknowledge it, and then to be mindful of a better way to do things, and then start practicing a better way, so that you don't deal those wrong things to your children and even your grandchildren, because sometimes you can affect your grandchildren and great grandchildren as well. So that would be my encouragement.
Wow. Thank you so much for such kind of advice. It's very, very impactful. And I hope that the viewers or whoever is born into that functional family will find it very imperative to utilize. Thank you very much for that. Another question I'd like to ask you is a little bit somewhat different. I was going to ask you, what is it like to be a published author? And what are the marketing strategies you utilize so far when it comes to the promotion of your book? Because I think this kind of book is not a book that everybody really need to read, because a lot of people that are actually born into dark functional family, almost, if you are to give a maybe research on it, almost I would similarly say maybe 70% or 80% of families are born or have one issue, there's that functional issue. So I was going to ask you, what are the marketing strategies you've utilized so far in terms of promoting this book? And what are the mediums you've utilized so far in terms of marketing Essays from Dysfunctional Families?
Well, for starters, for me, being a published author is amazing only because my past of school, I was not very well in school. English was one of the things I did not do well in. I just was not good at grammar or anything. And I don't know why. I guess because maybe it was my age at the time. I just wasn't mature enough to pay attention and care to listen. Because even now, what I did was I began to re-educate myself on the proper way to write English. And most of the questions I had were easy to understand. And I would ask myself, why didn't I understand it back then? Because I'm sure they taught this. I just don't remembering any of it. And I think maybe it's just at that time in my life, it wasn't a necessity. It wasn't something I cared to learn. And once it became a necessity and I had to teach myself, I was at the mode of learning it. And so being a published author is amazing, being that I never thought I could ever be one. As far as marketing, right now, what I do mostly is I market my books through Listia and eBay. I sell it through there. Because my main goal right now is not to, become a billionaire author. It's to gain readers and to hopefully impact people to think differently. Because if you don't, even if you're right, if you don't challenge what you know, you'll never know if it's right or not. And I definitely am a writer for what I call non-readers, because I used to be one. And I believe reading is fun. You just got to find the books that were written for you. And I write simply. I've read some books that are not so easily to read. And I know sometimes authors do that purposely for whatever reason. I purposely write in an English easy language because you'll never entice people to read if they're confused at the first page they start reading. And I've read books where I had to read this one book because I used to be part of a book club. I had to read the first 3 pages a good 10 times. And I finally told the person in charge of the book club, I'm not reading it. I won't be a part of this discussion because it's just I'm not getting it. And so I'm definitely a writer for non-readers. And right now, Listia, which is similar to eBay, except they use digital money instead of real money. And that's what I use to get my books out there, get my the knowledge of me out there. And yeah, that's it.
That's fantastic. I so much appreciate that. And I find it very wholesome. That's great. So the last question I'm going to ask you is that, you've become an author now. What sort of advice do you have for people who are still struggling to get a book out? What sort of advice do you have for people who are still on the verge of producing a wonderful book like yours?
Well, the first advice I always give is time and money is important. So that means you need to sacrifice. In other words, starting with time, I know many people who say, "Oh, I want to write a book. I don't have the time." And the first thing I ask, do you watch television? And if the answer is yes, you have time because you could be
Which
writing the book while you, instead of watching television. And so it really does take sacrifice. I mean, you have to give up many of the things you want to do. And so even if it means, let's say you wake up at 8 a.m. in the morning to get ready for work, wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., and just sacrifice, get up early to start writing and know that it's not an easy process. You, like I said, if you have a full-time job, it's not going to be easy to sacrifice the time to write. The thing is, if you want to be a writer, you're going to need to write. You're going to have to find, use whatever time you do have. The second thing is money. Again, if you have cable television, you know, if no matter, there are three ways to publish a book. There's, you can either find an agent and get published with one of the big publishing companies. You can get published with an independent, smaller publishing company, or you can do it yourself. No matter which way you do it, it's going to cost you thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. And so the first step is to start saving money. And so if you buy coffee 5 days a week at some store, stop doing that. And whatever, how, if it costs you, I don't know, $3.47 every day, put that $3.47 in a savings account. If you have Netflix or Hulu or any of those streamings, get rid of it. And whatever you were paying monthly, put that into a savings account. And every little bit does count. So this way, by the time you need the money, you have the money. It's kind of
All right.
annoying to finish the book and then you have no money to publish it. Because even if you get with a big publishing company, they usually, I think there's only one of them that accepts through the author itself. The rest, you have to have an agent, and agents cost money. And even if you don't have a if you have an agent and you haven't been signed yet, you still have to pay them money for them to find a
Yeah,
publishing company for you. And so it
yeah.
doesn't matter which way you go, there's going to be money involved. And so you, those are the first two steps, is to sacrifice your time and to sacrifice your money so that by the time it's ready to publish your book, you have the time and the money. The second thing is, well, the third thing would be research, of course. Just read books on writing, read books on publishing, read books on marketing, read books on the difference between publicity, advertising, and marketing, and educate yourself, because in today's time, it's, I would say probably 40, 50, 60 years ago, if you were an author, you didn't need to know about advertising and publicity and marketing because the publishing companies did everything for you. Today, publishing companies do stuff for you. They still want you to do some stuff. Even if you hire a publicist or you hire an advertising company or you hire an art marketing company, they still want you, they still require you to do much of the work, which was different from years ago. And so I would say
Yeah.
do your research so you know what you need to do. And then, of course, if you are not someone who knows much of social media, you need to figure it out, because again, that is something, publicists, agents, you name it, they want you to have a presence on some social media platform. And
Yeah.
it's, times have just changed. It's not as easy as it once was, as far as you just give your book away and then they do all the work. You are much a part of the process today, compared to in the past. So sacrifice your time, your money, and research. Just research, research, research. Read books on writing, on publishing. Um, and then there's this book which I can't recall the name of, unfortunately. Yeah, I think it, not encyclopedia. It's something for writers where it's, they publish it every year, and it has a very extensive list of publishing companies, agent companies. When I say publishing companies, I mean book companies. They have information on how you can be, write for greeting cards. So if there are greeting card companies out there looking for writers, they information in there. Um, I can't think of the word. It's writers something, and every year they show you a list of people who are looking for writers, and they give you the instructions of what they want, what they're expecting. They're specific, whether they're, because they're, nowadays there's publishing companies that will only publish horror books or only publish romance. And so even if you want to, which is, if you're a beginner and you really don't want to do all the work, it's good to be with a publishing company that's specific, because that means they're only publish, all of their resources is into looking for that particular audience. And yes, there's a chance your romance author and someone who doesn't like romance reads it and likes it. At the end of the day, you really want to focus your time and money on those who only like the genre you're in. And so that is definitely, I would, if you're a beginner, find a publishing company that only publishes in your publishing, in your medium, in your genre, because their audience, they spend their money advertising to that audience and audience only, which means there's more of a chance of you selling your books. And then the very last advice I would give is know that there is no such thing as overnight success, and that do not expect to be on Oprah's best-selling list 2 days after you publish the book. You know, it's really takes time. And don't focus on the success, focus on the journey and the lessons that are in the journey and the mistakes that are in the journey. Pay attention to that, the journey itself, and every mistake you make, really, even if you have to, I don't know, bring a notebook with you everywhere you go and a pen and take notes and, okay, this is what I messed up. Oh, this, I need to do this next time. Really be more focused on the journey of publishing the book, not the end result.
Yeah, thank you so much for this amazing advice, and I hope that the viewers will find it very impactful. So, viewers, you've just watched or spoke to Cassibel, the author of Essays from Dysfunctional Families and Literary Betrayal. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Cassibel, as you've just, spoke together to discuss his book. If you'd like to get a copy of his book, I left a link in the description part of this interview if you'd like to get a copy directly on Amazon. Thank you so much, Mr. Cassie, for accepting the invitation.
Thank you so much for having me on the show and inviting me. I appreciate it.